Is there like a minimum spend or size of budget you recommend? And maybe it's like, if my marketing budget is $1 million, should I start thinking about doing a billboard? Or I don't know, is there any rules of thumb for marketers out there? How do you think about it?
Yeah, so it's important to note that out of home is at first a real estate asset. So real estate varies from market to market in terms of its pricing, in terms of its reach, so on and so forth. And so the nice thing about having all the data about all the inventory in a given market is what we could quantify the amount of available impressions in the market. And so the way we think about how much should we spend in a market is actually a percentage of share of voice achieved over a 4-week period. Most billboard campaigns are run in 4-week increments. And so we typically have recommendations for here's an entry level 10% share of voice. So basically you're getting 10% of the available impressions over in that market for a given period of time. There's a saturation, which is 25%, and then domination, which is you're getting 50% of all the impressions in a market. And just to give you a sense, I have this cheat sheet pulled up right here to make it super easy, so I'm not bullshitting you. But obviously, New York is going to have the largest entry point. So if you don't have a $500,000 to spend in New York and you want to do a broad reaching campaign, I probably advise spending that elsewhere, because like you can enter a market like Philly for $150K, or you could take over. Some cities you can literally take over for, a couple $100,000 for an entire month. And I think the way to start thinking about it is which markets have my audience there first. And then you can arbitrage. Okay, well, this has a high concentration of the audience that I want to reach, and it's a cheap market. And so when you start to work with us, and we typically in the first couple campaigns you run with us, we operate kind of like a concierge white glove. We know that a lot of folks have bought either billboards the old-fashioned way, or they haven't bought them at all. And so we take this into account. We kind of handhold when you're coming into the market. So, but basically, what we tell our customers is like, you should know who you're trying to reach. We can help you find them in the real world, but you should know your personas, and you should probably have at least some budget carved out to hit that entry point. So. For most markets, that entry point's like $50K. There are options, lower price options for like pop-ups and experiential type marketing programs that could be had for less than $10K if you're very early days. But usually we recommend if you're doing stuff like that, we probably recommend that you just do it for like a conference or something smaller like that, instead of trying to run a market level campaign.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. So start with the city where you think your personas are living, and then kind of go from there. And then obviously New York is going to be very expensive versus something like Seattle or Austin might be a little bit cheaper. So it makes a ton of sense. Like, how do you think? So there's two sides. When I've done billboards, there's like two parts of my brain going. There's the placements, right? Like, okay, I've selected my city, but where am I going to put these billboards, right? Is it going to be an actual billboard? Is it going to be a bus shelter, an airport, transit, right? There's all those things. And then there's like the creative side. Like, where do you recommend people start? Or is it just all kind of got to happen together and you're figuring it out together? Or how do you think about that?
So when we're speaking with customer or prospects, we usually tell them that your audience dictates your placements and your placements dictate your creative. So what do I mean by that? So your audience is dictating your placement. So let's say your audience is HR, an HR professional. They over-index in Austin, right? And maybe there's certain types of inventory types that are very close to where that subset hangs out or lives. You might have that audience not exist in other markets or be less representative. So first we select where we decide where the audience is, and then we understand what is the makeup of the placements around there. And then there are rules of thumb for different formats. So obviously out of home is more than just billboards. It could be train ads at bus stops, ads on buses, ads in taxis, ads wrapped cars, you name it. It could be planes in the sky. It could be a whole lot of things. But ultimately, how a user interacts with that ad, let's call them users for this purpose. They're people out in the real world. How they interact with an ad will be contingent upon where they are relative to the placement. So like, for example, an example of a placement dictating creative would be like, you wouldn't put, a couple sentences on a highway billboard when people are speeding by it, like at 65 miles an hour. If you find that your audience is exposed to that placement, and that placement happens to be a 14 by 48 billboard, your creative is going to be, it's going to be important that you're very succinct with your creative. So probably like 4 or 5 words max. You're going to want to have a lot of high contrasting colors, right? So you want the message to pop, and ultimately you don't want to confuse. You want one message or one takeaway, and so that changes when let's say somebody waiting on a bus at a bus shelter will have more time on their hands. And so you've seen like brands like Oatly, right? Paragraphs, and like, the nice thing about out of home is it becomes your canvas once you start thinking about where the person is in throughout their day, what they can engage with, so on and so forth. But those are probably like, some good rules of thumb for thinking about how creative should kind of be closely intertwined with with what placements you've selected.
Like when you come up with the creative and the messaging for these billboards, like how cute and quirky do you need to get? Like Oatly's a good example, like very different and out there sort of campaign and like weird messaging to like stand out, right? But then I feel like there's other brands like Intercom, I think has a billboard now in SF where it's just like, we're the best customer success platform. We're doing awesome in AI. It's like literally just saying what they are. Like, how do you think about that balance between being sort of quirky and just being on point with your messaging and just saying, here's who we are? And I don't know. Yeah. How do you think about that?
I think about it the same way as like a sales pitch. You don't want to be rambling too much on the ad. There's a couple ways B2B companies could think about, out of home placements. One is the flex, right? So, hey, we're the best, or we're number one in the industry. We have the largest share. You see companies like Salesforce and Oracle been doing that in print, in TV for decades, right? That's one tactic. Another tactic is, hey, we solve this problem. And I think B2B companies often forget that they solve a problem and they forget to include the problem on the in the creative. So one of the most recent ads, I mean, this was a TV ad, but it was done by a B2B company. It was like, I think it was CrowdStrike. It's like, we stop cyber attacks. It's like 3 words. Tells you what they do. The brand name, you can go and learn more, but ultimately, you got to keep it simple. And I think communicating what pain point you solve, if you don't have that mass market awareness, is probably a good way to start thinking about it.
And do you recommend people like test creative ahead of time, like run a bunch of digital ads with the same billboards and kind of see same messaging that'll go in the billboards and see what works? Or is it like you want to keep this private and special and keep it in the billboard? Or how do you think about that?
Oh, no. We definitely encourage testing your messaging. The only caveat is we got to make sure that, the audiences are the same, and the only thing that changes, so the design is the same, but the only thing that changes are the wording. And so when you run a proper experiment on digital by pumping a bunch of ads at a landing page and then seeing, which one had the higher click through, that's usually a good way to start, being like, okay, this is going to resonate more. So we do have customers that have, different personas or different value propositions for different markets or different cities. And so like, we'll run Carvana is one of our largest clients. And we'll run like a 200 city billboard campaign, but they'll have very tailored. They have a very sophisticated, quantitative marketing team. They'll have, the messages that land with, the best people or the people in that market. And so, that's a lot of the testing basically flows into that.